For our first activity, we are going to be using our primary colors, blue, yellow, and red. So make sure you have a little bit in your palettes, as well as a round brush and a flat brush. We are going to start with the flat brush first, and we're going to do the first technique, which is using a thin line using the tip of your brush. So even though I'm using a bigger flat brush, you can use the thin side to create nice detailed lines. And if you use less pressure, they'll be even thinner. The more pressure, the thicker your lines. From there, I'm going to apply more paint on my brush, and I'm going to use the wide edge of my flat brush. You'll notice that if you don't have enough paint on there, it will drag a little bit, so you can always go back and apply more paint. Or you can let it drag to show more of that dry brush technique. We can also mix in a little bit of water, which can help extend the length of where our paint will reach. You might have to go over a couple times if you don't have enough on your brush, but you can always go back. So we're just doing a nice flat wash of a solid color. The next one, Flip Flop X, artists will do this to help cover all the little divots in your canvas to really ensure that none like little white speckles aren't showing through. So this is a really good technique for that. Again, the dry brush technique is not having a lot of paint on your brush, so I actually wiped some of it off on my palette, and then I am showing how to kind of use that dry brush technique and see how it differs from the others. Sgraffito, so this is the opposite of a dry brush. I have a lot on my brush, and I'm just gonna layer it on this box. And we're just gonna take a paper clip and we're gonna scratch through that paint, that thick paint, so we can create different textures using the Sgraffito method. Impasto is very similar, where we lay on some thick paint, but I'm gonna do impasto and my glazing layers at the same time. I'm actually creating like a little sunset scene with my glaze and my layers. So layering is when you start with one layer and then we build on it. With oil painting, it takes a long time to dry, so I'm not going to be waiting in between layers for it to dry. I did want to add multiple colors, so I'm going back to impasto now and layering it up really thick, trying to actually kind of create like a fire texture. From there, I'm using the yellow to mix in with my red, building up the layers to try to show the difference between sky and water. And then use just a little bit of water to kind of smooth out any of the white still showing through, and then I'll come back to that later. The next area is learning about blending and value with oil paints. So we're going to learn how to mix a tint and mix a shade. We do have white in a tube, which we can grab and put on our palette next to us. However, we do not have any black to create a shade. So how we're going to do this is we're going to take a little bit of all of our primary colors. So first I mix some red and yellow together, and then I add in a little bit of blue because I have the back of my palette is black. I'm just trying to create a dark value, and then I mix in a little bit of yellow to then create my shade. So you can see on the side I have a darker variant of yellow. Next, I am going to rinse my brush off, and I am going to mix some white with my red to create my tint. From there, we're going to go right into creating a value scale. So you're going to create 5 values of one of your primary colors. You can put your pure color in the middle, and then different values to the left and right. So first, since I already have a tint created, I am going to put in a mid tint. Not my lightest one because it isn't too light. I can actually mix some more white together to create an even lighter tint. From there, I am going to wash my brush off, and I will put in my pure color. So my pure color is just straight from the tube, not mixed with anything. Then we will be going directly into mixing our darker values. And again, to create darker values, you will use a combination of all 3 primary colors first, to create that darker value, then you will add it to your pure color. So I added a little bit of my shade combination to my red to create a darker red. And then I add even more of that mixture to make it a little bit even darker because I felt like it wasn't dark enough compared to my pure color. So you can kind of test that out while you're working. Then I do have to mix a little bit more of my shade and give myself a little bit more color. Mixing these together, so yellow and red first. Then I add some blue to create a really dark value. And then after I make this dark value, then I take this darkest value, mix it in with some of my red, and apply this directly on my paper in my darkest value area. And then, so I don't waste paint, I'm actually gonna go right into my graduated value scale and put in my darkest value, only go about a third of the way in. And then I am actually going to take some of just regular red. It did get really dark right away, so I need to make sure that I'm washing my brush before I get closer to the pure color, because I do want it to be just straight up red right there. And then how we blend these together is that you overlap your pure color into your darker color. So then just leave it. You don't want to overwork the paint because you don't want it to get too dark or too light. You want it to be a nice smooth transition in values. So then again, I wash my brush. I made like a subtle value scale on my palette, and then I keep adding more white as I work my way to the left. So again, showing light to pure color to the dark. So I'm showing a nice gradual change in value. Next, we're gonna do the same thing, just with a different color. So now I'm washing my brush off and I'm gonna go directly into my pure color, which I am choosing yellow for this value scale. So I'm going to take my pure yellow, put it on my palette because I ran out, and then I take my brush and paint right where it says the pure color, and I'm fading that both to the left and to the right. Then I will go back in with a little bit of white mixed with yellow, and then even more white as I get towards the lightest areas. You'll notice painting up and down actually blends it together smoother, and you create a nice smooth transition instead of going like painting left to right. Painting up and down creates a nice smooth transition. After that, I'm going to create my dark mixture again. So I need to create a shade. And I'm just adding in a little bit of what I had already made of my dark mixture into my yellow. It got really dark right away though, and I didn't want to fade that darkness to the left because it would have been too much. So what I'm doing now actually is I'm making a little bit darker going to the right, so it's almost like, you know, the blocked value scale. But what I'm doing next is I'm washing my brush off to have a clean brush, and I'm just going over that seam, fading it to the right to create that nice blended value. The last two value scales are creating color gradations. So this means we're going to be blending starting from one color, gradually fading into another color. So for the first one, I'm actually going to take some blue, since I haven't really used any blue besides making darker values. So I'm going to take my blue and go in about halfway. Then I'm going to wash my brush off completely so it doesn't dirty my paint. And I'm actually going to take yellow and start on the opposite end and feather that into my blue. Again, we're trying to be really careful that it doesn't look stripy at all. So you don't want the yellow just to stop once you reach the blue. You want to overlap your yellow onto the blue. Now the blue is way too powerful and you needed to add a lot more yellow over it. So just keep that in mind too. You want it to blend nicely. Remember, you can always go back in, wash your brush, and then use that clean brush without dipping into any new paint to help smooth out any area that looks a little too stripy, like I just showed you right there. You're going to do this one more time. Again, you can either do yellow into red or blue into red, since those are the choices that we have. Again, since I didn't use a lot of blue before, I am still continuing to use blue as my color change. So again, I started with blue, faded it towards the center, then I washed my brush, and now I'm going in with red. And again, I am fading this in towards the center so that they can overlap one another. So I'm fading the red into the blue and then the blue back into the red so that it shows a nice gradual change from blue to red. I then cleaned my brush and just went over the red so it was a little bit smoother. Finally, I am going to go back to my glazing and layers. It's not going to be dry yet because of just the nature of oil paint, but I did want to add some blue in there, some of my darker red to again show my horizon line, and then I added some water over that to help dilute the water area to still show some of the red showing through, but also have some darker values. Lastly, I added a little sun and a little reflection to really show that water scene that I wanted to imply. Well, I hope you enjoyed this assignment, and I look forward to see how you apply these different techniques as we go further in our oil painting unit.